What's happening, Internet fam? It is a beautiful morning here in Southern California. I am stuck in rush hour traffic going through LA right now, and that's a weird place to be. I kind of promised myself I would never be here ever in my life, and yet here I am. But you know, if you're gonna visit SoCal, you gotta take the good with the bad, and part of the bad with SoCal is definitely the traffic. And I didn't get a whole lot of sleep last night. I got enough. Had a really, really nice meal out at this place called Green Sleeves in Redlands. So, and I'm gonna probably Yelp about that later. I've been back on Yelp recently, Yelp reviewing places, just because I've been to some amazing places that were, you know, locally owned, you know, mom and pop kind of shops that were just like really good that I needed to tell the world about, because anything to slow the roll of giant corporations, literally anything at this point. That's just where I'm at politically. And that's why I'm live streaming today, because I wanted to talk a little bit about giant corporations censoring. A giant purge just happened on Facebook. I'm quite sure that YouTube is next. Twitter also did the giant purge same day as Facebook, I guess. So here we have different corporations colluding together to silence, you know, a lot of the same outlets. And I don't know if you follow Carrie Wedler on any social media, which I don't know if you can follow Carrie Wedler anymore. She's been a pretty reliable information source for me for a long time. She might not be your cup of tea. She talks a little bit quickly, and she's kind of a small, feisty brunette, which not everybody likes small, feisty brunettes. I happen to like small, feisty brunettes, so, but I also think she's a really good source of information, just period. She's certainly been trustworthy and given an honest narrative a lot of times, which is more than I can say for most of the different news outlets and media outlets that I've come across in the last 5-10 years. Anyway, she's being purged from Twitter, and the company that she works for, Anti-Media, which is another company that's been very reliable with their information, very honest about their narrative, etc. They've also been purged as well, I guess, from Twitter, and I guess from Facebook. I don't know. I don't really trust anything from Facebook. Facebook seems to be just random people and random corporations saying whatever they want, so you kind of have to take everything with a grain of salt on Facebook. There are certain things that strike me as true that have been found to not be true, and there have been things that have struck me as false that have turned out to be true. So you really got to be cautious with information on Facebook, because it is just overall overwhelmingly random people posting whatever they feel at the moment. And as we know, with human feelings, generally they're not very reliable as far as giving you an accurate, adequate source of information that you can take to the bank. However, I have gotten a lot of really great information from Facebook over the last 10 years. I'm hesitant to get off of Facebook for that reason. I was off Facebook for a while because of the divorce, and I did find that I was missing that source of information. There are people that I know and like in my feed who do put up anti-establishment stuff that has overall borne out to be worth paying attention to, and that's definitely me. I'm definitely anti-corporation, anti-establishment, and that seems to go along with what's being purged right now on Twitter and Facebook, is anything anti-establishment, and by that I mean anti-war, anti-US foreign policy, and you know, anything that's counter the narrative that we're the big giant good guys, and that all the money we spend on missiles and bombs with Lockheed Martin is somehow justifiable and a good idea, which I think anybody with even an eighth of a brain should know is not a good idea. We should not be bombing other countries, and we should not be spending money on Predator drones and missiles to build robots to murder children in the third world. That is what we do, and we shouldn't be spending money on that. I don't think that's, to me, that's just common sense, and yet now that's could be considered a radical point of view. I've heard people call it radical. I've even heard people call it radical and alt-right, which they're trying to make alt-right into Nazi. A lot of mainstream corporate media is associating alt-right with neo-Nazis and white power and Aryan supremacy and this kind of thing. And it's really ridiculous because they're trying to marginalize an entire school of thought that's basically just common sense, and they're trying to make common sense seem like it's an extremist point of view, and that is very bizarre to me, but that is what's going on now, to the point where even like some media and journalists that are definitely not either alt-right or that don't really, I don't even hardly know their political bias, such as Ben Swann. I'm talking about specifically. If you're not following Ben Swann, he's the only journalist I trust. I don't know what's happened to him in this media purge. I would be very surprised if he wasn't being attacked again by the corporate establishment. I would be very surprised if at some point YouTube doesn't take down his channel. He is one of the only journalists providing legitimate, reasonable information on a huge range of topics. He's the only journalist who did a piece on the Kavanaugh hearings that made any kind of sense. He was not at all pro-Kavanaugh whatsoever. In fact, he was very, the last piece he did, or the last one or the one before he did, like the rest of the media, I think he was following the Kavanaugh thing a little bit too closely and didn't do, you know, there's plenty of other things to talk about in the world. I don't think you need to do 3 pieces in a row on Kavanaugh, although he is a Supreme Court justice, so I get it, but whatever. But his second piece he did on Kavanaugh was absolutely scathing. I mean, scathing. To the point where I already hated the guy and thought he was a terrible, terrible choice for Supreme Court. And watching that second Ben Swann piece about him made me hate him even more. So to me, he's definitely not, you know, I don't know. I mean, a lot of the alt-right people are, you know, pro-Trump or whatever, and yeah, I don't see Ben Swann that way at all, like not even a little bit. I do think he favored Ron Paul a few years back, as did a lot of other people. That might be one of the reasons why I gravitate to him and trust his opinion. But I think a lot of sensible people gravitated towards Ron Paul, and I don't see that in any way being connected to the alt-right, to neo-Nazis, to any of that. That's just absurd, frankly. And yeah, so, but anyway, the purge has begun. If you're not following Carey Wedler, you should. It's CareyWedler, I believe, Carey Wedler, and she's still on YouTube. I saw her YouTube this morning talking about the purge, and I guess she's on Steam It too. And that brings me to my overall point. These corporate platforms are going to control the narrative in the future, if they're not already doing it. I think they're already controlling the narrative. That's why so many people are only getting, you know, inherently biased news, either from the extreme pro-corporate left or the extreme pro-corporate right. And it seems very clear to me at this point that everybody's news feeds are being curated by giant corporations who do not have your best interest as citizens of a supposed constitutional republic best interest at heart. It seems to me these corporations have their own corporate agenda. They always have, they always will. And that agenda is always predicated on the bottom line, the lowest common denominator, and rarely predicated on, you know, quality information, honest information, unbiased information. It just, you know, you're not going to get that from any of the corporate media. I mean, you know, the whole fake news phenomenon, everybody's talking about fake news. I wrote a song about fake news several years ago now, and I put it on my last album, Corporate America, and it's called Corporate Media. And it's something I've been aware of for a very long time now. The main lyric that repeats over and over in that song is "There's a liar on the box at 9 a.m." And it's true. So many people are waking up in the morning, getting their information from these large corporations that's completely false. It's not that the information itself is even false, it's that the entire narrative is false. It's like you can't even get a smidgen of accurate perspective on the overall topic before they go into their tirade and pitch of talking points that are all put out by the Associated Press. I mean, almost every single news organization is just cloning what the Associated Press has released that morning, and that is all government controlled, government disinformation. Basically, that's the way I look at it. I look at it as Pravda. And so in the Soviet Union there was a newspaper called Pravda, which stood for truth, which if you lived in the Soviet Union you knew was anything but truth. It was definitely the opposite of truth. It was just government propaganda. And that's how I look at all of corporate media. Occasionally you'll see a few things slip through the cracks, but it's just so rare these days. The narrative is always us versus them, good guys versus terrorists, and it's always pro-war. It's always, never questioning 9/11, never questioning JFK, never questioning these things that, in my mind, I think the average American citizen at this point is very aware of. They're not getting the straight story from the large corporate media. I don't think the overwhelming majority of the people that I know do not believe the official story on JFK, certainly. And I think the overwhelming majority of people that I know don't believe the official narrative on 9/11 as well. So, and those are two pretty major, significant events that for us to live under a false narrative in both cases is definitely doing our supposed constitutional republic a huge disservice. And it does make it impossible to figure out, how we're supposed to vote, what we're supposed to vote for. That's just true across the board. And it also kind of presents the overall fact that we live in 2018 and there's an overwhelming dearth of information. If you look at how much information and media we can consume now, it's so much more vast than at any point in human history. And it's been more than an exponential curve. I'd say that, an exponential curve is, one of those curves that, rapidly goes vertical, but it seems to me that this curve went more than vertical, more quickly than an exponential curve, because right now, between Instagram and YouTube and all these different social media platforms and just the internet in general, Facebook, all of it, you can get so much data in front of your eyeballs that there's no possible way you could digest it all, ever. I mean, you can never watch everything that's on YouTube. There's just no way. And there's more things being uploaded to YouTube every second, like this live stream right now, like many other live streams that I follow. I mean, I know a lot of people who are putting out 10, 15, an hour worth of media every single day. Similar to what I do. Some of them are doing different things to what I do, and I follow some of them, and I can't possibly keep up with them all together. I talk a lot about the crypto market. I should mention some things about the crypto market today. And I follow a lot of people in the crypto space. It's just something that I've been interested in since it came out. I do think that cryptocurrencies could potentially help take the federal government jackboot off of all of our necks and help the economy, help all of us individual or economic status. I do think it's one of the technologies that could give the power back to the people in a lot of ways. I'm hopeful about that. I'm optimistic. I remain hopeful and optimistic about the future in general. I do think that technology could, eventually liberate us from being in this kind of hard grind that most Americans find themselves in. And it almost doesn't seem like it matters what the industry is. I mean, I know a lot of people who are in the service industry, whether it's, working in restaurants, etc. I know a lot of people who are working professionals in other more serious industries like, the medical profession. There's people who work in law or law enforcement, and there's just, everybody is doing more work than should be required to survive at this point. And I think it's because of our economic system, the way it operates. I think it's because of the way the Federal Reserve just continually prints money and devalues all of our currency. I mean, things that I talk about in almost every vlog. And I do think cryptocurrency and some other technologies could help us get off that track. But this is a big question. How are we going to be able to determine what media is valid and what media is not valid? How are we going to fact check the information that we're getting on the internet? And there's no real good answer for this fact checking. I mean, and there's hardly any fact checking being done. There's been a lot of people who did an experiment where they posted something fake on a semi-relevant vlog or blog, and then the mainstream media took that and ran with it, and then later they said, ha ha ha, it was false, and the entire media, followed along with that narrative. And that's happening constantly, and it's not just happening from some random blog on the internet to the corporate media. It's happening the other way around too, where somebody on the corporate media will misspeak, be misinformed, to misunderstand something, put it out there, and then boom, all of the media, all of the corporate media, everybody's blog, everybody's talking about it. And now we live in a society where a lot of these false narratives and very wrong beliefs are being parroted and trumpeted from the hilltops, and it's insane. I mean, one of my big bailiwicks these days has been talking about men's rights and the narrative that masculinity overall is toxic. Obviously, that's something I have my own dog in that fight, having gone through an awful custody battle and lost in the most brutal and unfair way. I've never I-10 West. Here I am in LA. I've never harmed anybody in I haven't been in a fist fight since I was in high school, and I haven't threatened to harm anybody. I have no criminal record. I have no drug or alcohol abuse issues. And yet, I have zero custody of my kids, zero access to my kids. It's almost zero access. I get video chats. Grace won't talk to me on the video chats anymore. She says I'm not her dad. Everett last night told me in the video chat that I'm the meanest person in the world. And I said, well, to roll that back a little bit, tell me why I'm the meanest person in the world, Everett. And he said, this is what Everett said. He says, because you murdered my mom. And obviously that's ridiculous. I haven't murdered anybody. And certainly not his mom, who I haven't been in the same room with other than court dates for years. Wouldn't want to be in the same room with. I don't even want to be in the same room with her during the court dates. I don't even enjoy that. And it's just bizarre. It's like, I don't know why he said that last night in the video chat. I really don't. And I don't know where he's getting that false narrative from, or even that false feeling, The simple fact is, I would not have done anything to remove the children's mother from their lives in the way that's been done very unfairly and harshly to me. And so therefore I've been, all about, men's rights, and especially when that comes to, being a parent and parental alienation, and which is a horrible form of child abuse that my two kids are directly suffering through right now. So, but that's been my bailiwick recently, and it's interesting because on that specific topic, there's, it's completely okay to say terrible things about men. You can say whatever you want about men online, and it's just, the official narrative is that's fine, because we're in this patriarchy that's been going on for, centuries, and men have abused their power the entire time. Men are just abusers, period. And that's kind of the narrative that we're getting now across the board, especially white men. But I honestly think the misandry overall is a bigger deal. And misandry is just the opposite of misogyny. And most people don't even know the word misandry. They don't even know what a misandrist is. They don't know anything about it. But they'll say misogynist all day. They'll say misogyny all day. And how telling is that? That even in our language, that one term is well known and commonly used frequently all the time by everyone, and the other term is like nobody even has ever heard it or much less used it. And how telling is that? Even in our language, we have this cultural bias and false narrative now, as if misandry can't be a thing. And it's definitely a thing. We're living in the most misandrous culture maybe in human history. I don't know. I mean, I think that human history's been around for millions of years, so, or hundreds of thousands of years anyway. And so, I mean, maybe there was a culture that was more misandrous than the one we're living in now at some point, but I don't know of it, and I don't know of it in written history, or, haven't heard of it, blah, blah, blah. But right now, I mean, it is very tough to be a man. Very tough to be a man in our society. It was, oh, poor baby with his male patriarchy privilege. It's like, dude, men commit suicide like 4-to-1 over women. Men live shorter lives. Our health is, we have more health issues at a younger age than women. Men graduate college less. Men are way more likely to be incarcerated. Men are way more likely to lose custody of their children. Men are way more likely to pay alimony than women are to pay palimony. Men are way more likely to be forced to pay child support versus women at unbelievably unfair levels in a lot of cases. Men are actually getting paid less for the same exact job now. That's one that's a little bit harder to talk about because it's such a big, I mean, you're talking about the entire economy at that point, and that's a lot to unpack. But in a lot of industries, if men have the exact same job, the exact same hours as women, they're actually getting paid less. And yet the official narrative is that the wage gap is the other way around. And that's really, really not true in a lot of ways. There is still a wage gap between men and women overall, and men do still have an advantage because the very top paying professions are predominantly male. One of the reasons being is the very top paying professions are brutal and hard, and men seem to choose that more often than women. Men are still more aggressive. Men are still more lifestyle choice, pain tolerant. I guess I'm gonna phrase it like that. I mean, men are predominantly CEOs. I think only 16% of CEOs are women. There's not a whole lot of women who want to be that kind of aggressive, hardcore axe man that you have to be when you're a CEO of a large corporation. So, which that's not saying something bad about women. Honestly, that's saying something bad about men. So, so again, I'm not sexist at all. I think that everybody should have an equal opportunity. I think that women and men should be considered for every job that there is out there. But when you have 7 applicants that are male for a job and 1 applicant for a job that are women, which I think is the case in most CEO job applications, CTO, any kind of high-level executive position, it generally favors men, just overwhelmingly, because men are more likely to say, yeah, I'll work 60, 70 hours a week and forgo social life, family life, whatever, to go down and chase that dollar, which is not a positive thing. I don't think anybody should be doing that. I don't think that's healthy for anybody. I think that the people who tend to do that are some of the least healthy mentally people I know. One of the most mentally unhealthy, horrid people I've met in my entire life is a man. Careful with the definition there, because I don't really consider him a man on a lot of levels, but and he works a lot. He works all the time. He's always worked all the time, and that's part of his self-worth to himself, and that's part of his self-worth to his family as well. And it's really pathetic because he's not in fact a man. He doesn't stand up for himself in any way. He doesn't stand up for what's right. in most cases. He just goes along to get along. And, you know, part of that is being at work, you know, 60, 70 hours a week, even now in his old age. And it's really just sad. I mean, that's no way to live. And, you know, I did the grind where I was working 60, 70 hours a week for a little while at a high-level executive position. And that's not how I want to live my life. And I don't respect it now because I'm older and wiser, and now that I've done it, I'm on the other side of it going, man, if that's the way you're living your life, you're doing something wrong. You're living wrong. You're doing something wrong to yourself. You're doing something wrong to your family. You're doing something wrong for society in general, because other people need some of that work. They need some of that time to be paid, etc. And if you're working 60, 70 hours a week, that means somebody else somewhere is underemployed, unemployed, not getting paid enough, whatever. That's just the way I look at it now, having been on the other side of that. And that's, you know, that's not part of the official narrative. You know, the official narrative is the more you work, the harder you work, the better of a person you are, period. That's the way society treats employment and work ethic and all that. And I don't think that's healthy for anybody. It's clearly not healthy for anybody. I mean, we got more people in this country on pharmaceuticals and mood-enhancing drugs than ever before. So it's pretty clear to me that there are changes that need to be made with our perspective as far as what's a healthy way to live, etc. So anyway, kind of got off topic there for the social media purge, the information purge. Getting any kind of digital information at all is really drinking from that fire hose. This is a problem that's only getting worse at more than an exponential rate, I believe, and that's going to continue to get worse at more than an exponential rate. I don't think there's any quick and easy fixes for this, but I do think that one of the things you could do is just completely block all corporate media, because they, by overwhelmingly, seem to have the most false narrative, the most political bias, the most everything. I mean, as far as false narrative, false information, fake news. There's no faker news than the corporate media. I mean, I am not a fan of Alex Jones. I am not a fan of the Young Turks. But yet I think both of those news outlets are more valid than CNN at this point. More valid than any of the large establishment corporate media things. And, you know, if saying that is going to get me knocked off of YouTube, hey, better follow us on Steemit, because Steemit is blockchain based. I think it's censorship resistant. You cannot be shut down on Steemit, and so get on Steemit. It's a little bit complicated. You do got to write down your private key or copy paste it somewhere. But it's absolutely mandatory that we as a society unshackle ourselves from the corporate controls that we've kind of married ourselves to over the last 20, 30, 50, 60, 100 years. And certainly with our perspectives and our narratives and our worldview, unshackling from the corporate chain is the most important thing we can do right now. So don't do CNN, don't do Fox News, don't do MSNBC, don't do any of it. They're all fake news. They lie about everything. It's not even that what they're saying is false, it's the narrative in which they frame everything is false. And that's a much more dishonest and much more dangerous reality that they're putting us under. And that's why we've been kind of in this lockstep towards jackboot fascism for decades now. You know, most of the media will not even question the Predator drones and multi-$1,000 missiles and bombs we're dropping on generally people who are already impoverished, you know, living in tent cities and squalor in the third world. These are the people we're dropping, you know, $300,000 missiles and bombs on. It's just, it's nuts. And yet nobody on corporate media is saying that. So what does that tell you? What does that tell you? How reliable are they? Anyway, hope you're having a good day, Internet fam. No corporate media, no corporate anything. I will be posting from the road more. Be posting a lot more. I'm gonna double down on who I want to be, how I want to be. Just be that. Love you all.